following 2 decades, 30 states followed suit. Among them was New Jersey, whose sterilization law was passed by future American President Woodrow Wilson while serving as governor in 1911. In May of 1927, the Supreme Court upheld the state of Virginia's constitutional right in the landmark case Buck versus Bell to sterilize, for eugenic purposes, members of society deemed genetically unfit. And I just want to remind it, this is an involuntary sterilization law. The superintendent, J.H. Bell, of the Virginia Colony for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded, determined Carrie Buck and her mother to be feeble-minded with promiscuous tendencies. Bell also decided that Carrie's 7-month-old daughter, Vivian, was feeble-minded and fated to become like her mother and her grandmother. In delivering the Supreme Court's verdict, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. famously declared, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." By 1932, state statutes had authorized the sterilization of 12,145 individuals. In the first few decades of the 20th century, academic institutions began integrating eugenic theory into their curriculum. By 1914, more than 40 universities offered courses on eugenics, and these included some of America's most prestigious institutions, such as Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Purdue, Northwestern, Berkeley, Stanford, and New York University. High school textbooks also incorporated eugenic theory, echoing the findings of psychologist Henry Goddard, who posited in his 1912 study of the Colic family that feeble-mindedness was an inheritable trait. For this study, Goddard traced the family lineage of an 8-year-old Deborah Colic, who was a patient at the training school at Vineland in New Jersey. Deborah's family tree, Goddard found, produced 143 feeble-minded protégés, along with dozens of epileptics, alcoholics, prostitutes, and common criminals. Goddard's study established a causal relationship between mental deficiency and social vice, and transformed society's perception of mental deficiency. Mental defects that society once viewed as pitiable morons who were only associated with social and sexual deviancy, pauperism, and crime had now become the cause. Feeble-mindedness then shifted from a burden to a menace. Superintendents of mental institutions, Goddard among them, capitalized on social anxieties concerning the feeble-minded and pushed for segregation and institutionalization. In 1904, the national population of feeble-minded patients in public institutions was 14,347. By 1923, the national population had reached 43,000. Mental health and social reformers spurred this increase by spreading the menacing message that millions of mental defects were at large in the population, and increasing in number due to immigration and their sexual fertility. They pushed states to build more mental institutions and adopt new social policies regarding the feeble-minded, such as very restrictive immigration and marriage laws. Furthermore, new developments in intelligence testing allowed psychologists to categorize and calculate an individual's IQ. Due to the increasing number of people judged to be feeble-minded, most superintendents of mental institutions believe that total institutionalization of all mental defects was an unrealistic goal. Sterilization allowed superintendents of overcrowded state institutions to release mentally deficient patients back into the community. Once a patient was sterilized, mental health and social welfare professionals no longer viewed that patient as a threat. By mid-century, sterilization would become the desirable alternative to institutionalization in society's effort to control the feeble-minded. By the mid-1930s, however, psychologists and geneticists, among others, such as the Catholic Church, challenged the scientific and ethical legitimacy of eugenics. A study conducted by American psychologist Carl Murchison regarding an IQ survey comparing college students and prisoners revealed similar, rather than differing, intelligence scores. Murchison's findings challenged eugenic claims for the direct and uncomplicated hereditability of criminality and intelligence. Research experiments conducted with foster children and identical twins by American biologist Horatio H. Newman exposed environmental factors to be as influential as inheritable characteristics in assessing an individual's mental and social capabilities. The data from Newman's experiment showed that a twin placed in a superior foster environment to that of his or her identical sibling tested higher in IQ. Newman found that what heredity could do, environment could do also. Yet in spite of these scientific findings, the socioeconomic and political factors surrounding the increasing feeble-minded population allowed eugenic sterilization policy to continue throughout the Great Depression and into the post-World War II period. Advocates of eugenic sterilization saw sterilization as a cautionary measure, both protecting individuals they believed incapable of handling the responsibilities of parenthood, while saving society the financial burden of socially rearing any future offspring. Now, some scholars argue that eugenics began to fade as a mainstream national movement in the United States during the 1930s, and waned significantly in the aftermath of the Holocaust and Nazi eugenic experimentations. After World War II, many eugenicists, American eugenicists, desired to disassociate themselves from Nazi, racial, and anti-Semitic policies, along with the negative connotations that now surrounded eugenic ideology. Yet despite this, after World War II, a handful of states, including Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, and Indiana, defied the national trend and continued or increased eugenic sterilization. In total, scholars have estimated that 60,000 individuals had been sterilized in the United States by the 1960s for eugenic reasons. Now, moving beyond the United States to the international arena, other countries followed in the footsteps of the U.S. and enacted their own involuntary sterilization legislation. Denmark passed legislation in 1929, Canadian provinces of Alberta in 1928, and British Columbia in 1933, Sweden and Norway in 1934, Finland and Danzig in 1935, and Estonia in 1936. Germany did not pass legislation until 1933, when Hitler passed a compulsory sterilization law that was based somewhat on our American model, formulated by American eugenicist Harry Laughlin. An interesting Minnesota connection, Charles Fremont Dike, founder of Minnesota's Eugenics Society, wrote a letter to Hitler in 1933 commending him on his eugenic practices. It has been estimated that about 400,000 individuals were sterilized for eugenic purposes under the Third Reich. In conclusion, what is important and key to understand is that eugenic theory and ideology inspired a transnational movement that linked social reproductive policy to a loosely based scientific theory that ultimately led to devastating consequences for thousands upon thousands of individuals. Studying the history of eugenic policy and its ideology and its implications allows historians as well as society to understand how ideas regarding reproductive and social control of certain individuals and populations continue to be debated and contested in the broader United States then and indeed now. Thank you.
And to give sort of put faces on this and to give a little bit more context, what I want to do is I want to play a couple video clips for you. These were taken from Rock Center with Brian Williams. I don't know if anybody knows who Brian Williams is. He's now the face of news on NBC. And this will, again, give a little context of stuff that was happening in the 70s in North Carolina. And it's been in the news recently, so.
Being Charm of Windfall, North Carolina, a sleepy town where the Perquimans River empties into the Albemarle Sound. But buried in the stillness of this place, it seems time has forgotten a secret shame.
It was sort of a hush-hush type of thing. And the records and files were all hidden away down in the basement, locked under a key.